Thank you all so much for joining us at the Chinese for Affirmative Action District Attorney Candidates Forum. My name is Annie Lee, and I am the Director of Policy at Chinese for Affirmative Action, or CAA. CAA is a Chinatown-based nonprofit founded in 1969 to protect the civil and political rights of Chinese Americans and to advance a multiracial democracy in the United States. Today, we work in and on behalf of the broader AAPI community, and we advocate for systemic change that protects immigrant rights, promotes language diversity, and remedies racial and social injustice. We are gathered for the CAA District Attorney Candidates Forum. The questions that I will ask the candidates have been crowdsourced from CAA staff, partner organizations, and community members. We will start with introductory remarks, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to introduce themselves. Then there will be a Q&A in which I ask all 3 candidates a question, and each candidate has 2 minutes to respond. I may ask a candidate a follow-up question during the Q&A. Lastly, each candidate will have the opportunity to give a 2-minute closing remark. Please keep your introduction, response to questions, and closing remarks to 2 minutes each. We will use the yellow warning symbol to indicate 30 seconds left in your response and a red alarm clock to indicate that time is up and to wrap up as soon as possible. I may cut you off if you do not wrap up promptly. We will rotate which candidate responds first, beginning in alphabetical order by last name. With that, let us begin with each candidate's introductory remarks. Mr. Hamasaki will start with his 2-minute intro, followed by Ms. Jenkins, then Mr. Veronese.
Thank you. My name is again John Hamasaki, and I'm running to be the next District Attorney of San Francisco. As of last night, I am the Democratic Party's first choice to be the next District Attorney of San Francisco. And I think the reasons are because I have a long history of service to the community and a lot of experience in management and leadership. I'm the former past president of the Asian American Bar Association, where I served on the board for 6 years and as president for 1 year. While I was on the Asian American Bar Association presidency in 2020, it was during the pandemic and the rise of anti-Asian violence. I worked with both community groups, local, state, and national organizations to address the anti-Asian bias and violence that is began during the pandemic and has only increased since then. I'm a former San Francisco Police Commissioner. I served 4 years on the commission where I worked on such things as domestic violence, interactions with deaf and hard of hearing, and language access, cultural competence, trauma-informed responses to domestic violence and other important issues before the city. During my 4 years on the Police Commission, I oversaw the U.S. Department of Justice reforms, and also helped implement the reforms for the California Department of Justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins?
Yes, thank you. As you know, I'm Brooke Jenkins, and I'm currently serving as San Francisco's District Attorney. I started back in the San Francisco DA's office in 2014 in the misdemeanor unit. I thereafter ascended into the general felonies unit, where I spent 3.5 years, and almost 2 years of that time, I was also the designated hate crimes prosecutor before being promoted into the sexual assault unit and eventually the homicide unit. And what that experience has given me is the ability to step in right away and begin implementing policies that I believe will advance public safety in San Francisco. We are at a critical point right now, both with respect to our personal safety as we walk about this city, but also our economy is suffering from the rampant theft, the unwillingness of conventions to come here as they used to, and a hesitation by tourists to come to our city. And so it is paramount that we fix the situation on the street right away. And what I've done immediately is to come in and to begin promoting more accountability with respect to drug dealing in San Francisco, dealing with repeat offenders differently than we do our other offenders, and making sure that we are restructuring the office in a way that is necessary in order to address both property crimes, that violence against the Asian community, and other issues that are paramount right now to the issues that are going on. And so in that capacity, what I've done is to bring in an experienced team of prosecutors to lead the office who have a combined over 100 years of prosecutorial experience, so that we can move forward with making the city safe while also promoting more equity in the system to make sure that it is more fair, and we're promoting alternatives to incarceration as we should in a responsible way. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Veronese.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak to you all here today. John, congratulations on your endorsement last night, the Democratic Party. It's a big deal. I also received the endorsement of the Democratic Party behind John, and I'm very proud of that endorsement. A little bit about myself. I'm born and raised here in San Francisco. I truly understand the streets of San Francisco, the different constituencies that operate in and around politics in San Francisco, and that are necessary in order to get the job done to be district attorney. I have been a police officer here in San Francisco, a district attorney, investigator for 5 years, senior DA investigator. I've been the police commissioner here in San Francisco for 4 years under Gavin Newsom's administration. I've been the California Criminal Justice Commissioner for 7 years under 2 governors appointed by Democrat John Burton. And I've also been the San Francisco Fire Commissioner. But most proudly, I am and have been for the last 22 years, a civil rights attorney. I have been sticking up for the rights of individuals for the last 21 years in state and federal courts throughout this country. I have successfully litigated discrimination cases and proven racial animus in all of my cases. And I do not have a problem proving racial animus, and have successfully done that. When I become district attorney, I will focus on the fentanyl dealers. I'm not going to focus on press conferences and passing policy and telling the people what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to go out and do it. On day one of my administration, I will go out and arrest the fentanyl dealers. That happens on day one. There is no reason why that shouldn't be happening today. I will also recharge the crimes for hate crimes against the Asian community. The violence that is happening today that is coming from the East Bay, these thugs that are coming from the East Bay and preying on our most vulnerable communities, it's unacceptable. And I will go after them on day one. I do not have a problem charging hate crimes. I intend to charge those hate crimes. I will also hold the government accountable. We must make sure that the Department of Health and all of our government entities are being held accountable for the amount of money we're spending on mental health, addiction, and homelessness. And that's not being done today. So thank you for the opportunity, and I'll give you more as I answer questions.
Thank you all so much for those introductory remarks. Now we will move on to the Q&A. The first question will be answered by Ms. Jenkins, followed by Mr. Veronese, then Mr. Hamasaki. First question. CAA co-founded Stop AAPI Hate, the leading national aggregator of self-reported anti-AAPI hate incidents. Stop AAPI Hate received over 900 reports of hate incidents in San Francisco since March 2020. 83% of all the anti-AAPI hate incidents reported to Stop AAPI Hate are non-criminal. For instance, verbal harassment by a stranger walking by on the sidewalk. How will you, as district attorney, address anti-AAPI hate when the vast majority of hate incidents are not criminal?
So we have to address first what is criminal, because of course that is within our wheelhouse. And so what I've tried to do is restructure the office in a manner that allows us to more greatly address what's happening, especially with the elder community, to make sure that those cases are being handled by more senior prosecutors who have a greater ability to go in and prove those cases, but also have more experience shepherding a vulnerable victim through the system. What we also have to do with respect to those incidents that do not constitute an actual crime, meaning what people would call, what unfortunately we have to deem as free speech, is to ensure that we're doing more than just prosecute. We have to be out in the community promoting more unification. I think we're at a point in San Francisco and in America where there's a big racial divide amongst a lot of groups. And so we need to be doing outreach cross community so that there is cultural sensitivity so that we feel more unified rather than letting a number of different political issues create that tension, but also to make sure that we are extending our hands to those who are feeling unsafe to come out of their doors, which is to build up the way that we're serving our victims. You don't have to be the victim of a reported crime to receive services from our victim services unit, or even from the organizations that we partner with. So making sure that those who experience these types of hateful interactions are receiving the services that they need in order to move forward, because it is traumatizing whether or not it's a crime to have someone yelling at you offensively and doing other things. And so it's making sure that we are on all those tracks, prosecuting what is crime, trying to unify our communities, but also really giving the services and the support necessary for those who have been victims of things that are hateful incidents, even if it's not a crime, so that they can move forward safely and securely in their lives.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. Mr. Veronese?
The problem with what's going on today in this area is that our criminal justice system, our chief law enforcement officer, the city district attorney, is sending the wrong message. And that message is that we're actually going to tolerate this type of speech. We're going to tolerate this type of activity. We're going to tolerate people coming from the East Bay to prey on our vulnerable communities. And so the message was very clearly sent because of the lack of hate crimes being charged in San Francisco. As I mentioned earlier, I've been proving racial animus in courts throughout this country for the last 21 years, and I have no problem charging racial animus cases, even when there is not a smoking gun. You don't need direct evidence to charge racial animus cases, and I'm not afraid to charge them. I'm not afraid to send the message to the people that are coming from the East Bay into San Francisco to prey on our Asian community that we're not going to tolerate this. And as long as we don't send that message, as long as we don't stand behind this community and send these strong messages, these crimes, whether or not there is the violent crimes against the community or just the hate speech, this will continue in San Francisco, and we see it continue. It's still happening today in San Francisco, even with the district attorney's office is passing all of these wonderful policies that really have no true effect on the streets of San Francisco. If you ask people in the Asian community, and I do this regularly, they are afraid to leave their homes. This is the San Francisco that we are giving them today. When we had Salesforce just came to San Francisco, tens of thousands of people just returned home from Salesforce. And what they're saying is they've seen things in San Francisco that they should never have to see. They're seeing the types of the version of San Francisco that this administration is giving them. And that is not what we deserve. We deserve the best version of San Francisco. And that's only going to happen if we have a district attorney that's going to fight for them. The Asian community is not going to feel safe in walking the streets of San Francisco with this district attorney and this administration. And I promise this community that changes under my administration. We will be tough on people coming into San Francisco, and we will not tolerate it.
Mr. Hamasaki?
As an Asian American who frankly grew up with bias and hate that we're talking about, this issue is personal to me. You know, I grew up in an all-white suburb with only 4 Asian kids, and you know, I had to fight for my safety, for my security, to even walk home from school since kindergarten. In college, I was the victim of a violent racist attack by 3 men with a baseball bat who, luckily, I was able to block from trying to strike my head. And, you know, I know what the frustration is in the community because I've dealt with district attorney's offices like this one where, you know, there's a lot of talk and a lot of press conferences, but they're not really addressing the pain and the difficulties of the victims. When I went through this process, I got a letter telling me to appear in court as the victim on multiple dates. Nobody ever reached out. Nobody ever talked to me. We need to expand victim services to really address cultural competence, language access, and trauma-informed counseling. The other thing we need to do is not just setting a tone, but getting out and speaking to the communities. I've been out in the Asian American community since, before I started law school. This is my community, and these are the people that I speak to and often speak for. And we need to know that this type of conduct is simply not acceptable in San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco to get away from this type of conduct. So we need to do some of the work that CAA has been doing. I was president when we partnered with CAA to help spread the word about Stop AAPI Hate back in 2020. We did bystander trainings to help people intervene in hate incidents. And as district attorney, it's simply not tolerable to let the status quo remain. Thank you.
Thank you all. The next question will be answered first by Mr. Veronese, then Mr. Hamasaki, then Ms. Jenkins. While many anti-AAPI hate incidents are not criminal, as described above, AAPIs who are the victims of crime often struggle to navigate the criminal legal system, which is confusing, time-consuming, and not language accessible. How will you center the needs and wishes of AAPI crime victims who may not understand the criminal legal system or speak proficient English? Mr. Veronese.
Yeah, thank you, Annie. It's a great question, but this is not a problem that's unique to the AAPI community, although there are some language barriers there. I have represented several people over the last couple of years who have been victimized by people, in a violent crime or a burglary of some kind or a crime in San Francisco, where they're just absolutely confused about what's going on with their participation in this criminal justice system. So it makes it even worse when you have language barriers, when you have cultural barriers. And so this is a big issue. This is a big problem within the criminal justice system, within this particular DA's office as well. And what we need to do is make sure that victims are essentially coddled from the very beginning, that they understand what the process is, what their rights are, and they understand those in languages, frankly, that they understand. So it's not unique to this particular community because we've got so many. The greatest thing about San Francisco is we have so many different diverse communities. So whether it's our Hispanic community, whether it's our Chinese community or Vietnamese community, you have all of these different diverse communities that exist, and we just need to make sure that with each community that we have that kind of cultural competence. And so, and that we make sure that the victims understand the process and that the process is fair to them and that they further understand their rights. From the very beginning to the very end, and even beyond convictions, because when people are convicted and they go to jail, at a certain point they do get out of jail, and there's a sense of insecurity among victims when people get out of jail, and we just need to make sure that they also feel safe living in their city after people are getting out of jail, because in a lot of cases these victims, these people that have been convicted, they know where the victims live in some of these cases, and so there's this great fear about people being released back into the streets and victims not being protected by the system. It's actually, I would say it's not even unfounded fear. It's a founded fear, and it's justified.
Mr. Veronese, you mentioned the importance of cultural competency. If you were DA, how will you ensure that your office is culturally competent to respond to AAPI victims as well as other victims?
Yeah, well, we need to make sure that the face of the DA's office represents the diverse cultures that exist in San Francisco, that we have people that speak languages that are from the various places that our diverse communities are from in San Francisco. And I understand this very well. I've had clients, Chinese American clients in my cases where they don't understand, even though it's a civil process, where they don't understand the civil process. And so you have to bring in people to break down language barriers. You have to bring in people to help them fully understand how the process works and what their role is in this process, and furthermore, what their rights are in this process. And that's a big part of making them feel safe and secure and making them feel like they're getting a criminal justice system that serves them.
Thank you. Mr. Hamasaki, same question.
Yeah, I think I jumped the gun in talking about this on the last answer. But, I've been through this part. I've been a victim, and it's just unfair the way the prosecution system has historically treated victims. They often just get a phone call or a letter to show up in court. and they don't have the type of wraparound, culturally competent services and with language access that, these are things that I fought for on the police commission. We had a language access working group to ensure that police officers who were interacting with the Asian American community and other communities had officers that could speak Mandarin, Cantonese, Toisanese, and also understanding the differences in cultures and the way to interact with folks so that they feel safe, so they feel secure, so they feel trust in the criminal justice system. The district attorney's office was moving in that direction. They had a woman, Casey Lee, who spoke all three of those Chinese-derived languages. This district attorney demoted her and removed her as the head of victim services. From what I'm hearing inside the office, it's caused a real setback with the Chinese and Asian American community. So, it's cases, from a prosecution perspective, cases don't get solved if the police aren't interacting in a way and a manner that allows victims to feel that if they go to court, they'll be protected. And if prosecutors are doing the same, they don't have the same victim services that can really address the needs of the community. It's a similar problem. So these are things that can be done both on the street with the police officers, and then both at the also with the prosecution and victim services.
Mr. Hamasaki, follow-up question, you have 1 minute. How does what you described fit into Prop D implementation, which voters passed last June to create a new Office of Victim and Witness Rights?
So I think with Prop D, that was a recognition of the work that a lot of us have been doing to allow for the type of culturally competent interactions with victims in the criminal justice process. That's, it's an unfulfilled at this point promise, but it's something that I think, we need people who understand what our Asian American and Asian elder victims are going through. I come from this community. It's a community I've always represented. I've been a leader in this community. And I think that, really we need the first Asian American, or at least East Asian American district attorney in San Francisco right now who understands the needs of our community and can implement them both through the new Prop D, but also through expanding and building out victim services as it exists in the district attorney's office right now. Because, I think they're doing some good work, but I think they've got a long way to go. And I think, by removing an individual, Casey Lee, who was really leading the charge, it set things back for Asian Americans within the district attorney's office.
Thank you. Ms. Jenkins.
Thank you. So I'm going to talk from what I've been trying to do, which is when I chose to promote a new head or hire a new head of victim services, it's because I wanted somebody who was focused on trauma-informed services, somebody who came from a psychiatry perspective, where it's about really what it takes to usher someone who has been through extreme trauma through this process. And unfortunately, being a lawyer is not the same as being somebody who has treated victims over decades through that traumatic sort of process that they're going through emotionally, mentally, and for some of them who have been physically violated, physically trying to recover. And so that is why I promoted a new head. What we've done is to actually promote Dr. Paul Lamb into a chief deputy position, who now oversees a number of units, including our vulnerable victims unit, which is the unit that handles elder abuse cases, violence against elder cases, which is housing all of the cases of the violence against the Asian elders that have happened. But also he oversees community engagement so that we are not just stopping with giving services to people who are the victims of crime after they're a victim. We want to be doing outreach in the community, particularly with our monolingual community, so that they understand what their rights are so that they understand that if something happens, who they call, what they do, what the resources are that are available to them, and making sure that even regardless of whether or not somebody is the same culture, that they still have the ability to serve, right? I only speak English. I've represented victims and I've been fighting for victims for years, many of whom don't speak English, but I used language services so that I could do an interpreter, so that I could do what it took to connect with them and to fight for them. And we want to make sure that across the board, all of our employees are culturally competent and able to serve any victim.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. A 1-minute follow-up question. We understand that the previous AAPI victims unit at the DA's office has been rolled into this new vulnerable victims unit. Given this change, how will you specifically service AAPI victims who have unique needs and whom you have stated are a priority?
Yes, and that is because that initial unit, unfortunately, while it was represented to be a full unit, when I took over, was simply comprised of interns, and it did not actually house our actual advocates. And so we wanted to make sure that some of our most experienced advocates were still being able to handle these cases and lead victims through this process. We now have 4 Cantonese speaking advocates, one of whom resigned, and we are prepared right now interviewing to make sure that we replace her with another Cantonese speaking advocate, so that we are assuring that not only are the cases within the vulnerable victims unit having people who are bilingual, but also we have Chinese speaking and other monolingual victims in our other units. In our sexual assault unit, we have murder victims, families who are monolingual, and so we have to make sure that we're allowing those victims to be served as well. And so that's why we're making sure that we enhance our numbers of bilingual staff.
Thank you. The next question will be answered first by Mr. Hamasaki, then Ms. Jenkins, then Mr. Veronese. Many members of the AAPI community are harmed by the prison to deportation pipeline. This occurs when California prisons voluntarily transfer immigrants who have served their sentence to Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, for detention and deportation. This means that these community members are doubly punished, while U.S. citizens are able to return home after serving their sentence. Since 1989, San Francisco has been a sanctuary city, which limits when law enforcement officers may cooperate with ICE regarding a person's release from custody. How can the DA's office best uphold the city's sanctuary policy? Mr.
Thank you. This fight for sanctuary cities and against deportation is one that I've been involved in throughout my career. Probably one of the most known examples was representing, along with the Asian Law Caucus, Daniel Marr, who was born in Macau, and after he served his prison sentence, was set to be deported to China, an area and a place that he had never been, and he left when he was 3 years old. So he really didn't have any knowledge or cultural connection at that point. And we worked together to clear his record and actually sought a pardon. The governor granted a pardon, and it was significant enough of a case that Donald Trump actually angrily tweeted about it. So this is a fight that I've worked on. I've never allowed for deportation mandatory convictions to occur on my watch. And I think I would distinguish that with the district attorney, who throughout her campaign has demanded an increase in deportation eligible offenses. She specified that she wanted certain types of drug crimes to be that the convictions must happen for deportation, I believe mandatory convictions. I don't know if she's changed that policy, but that was her demand all throughout the campaign. So I think we really need to change this prison to deportation pipeline. I think it impacts real people and real families. I know there are a lot of fights going on right now with people who were Cambodian refugees and deportation. I know that CAA has been an advocate along with Asian Law Caucus to stop this, and it's something that I would not allow on my watch as district attorney. Thank you.
Ms. Jenkins?
Thank you. As someone whose own family was disrupted by my dad's lack of immigration status here in America, I take this issue very seriously. We have in our office the guidelines of making sure that we are providing immigration safe pleas to people who have, who are undocumented here. Of course, there are boundaries to that, right? If somebody commits murder, there's no immigration safe plea for murder. We have to move forward with those cases in the way that the law requires and for public safety. But one thing that I can commit to is never working with or participating in any ICE investigation, in providing any information to immigration officials. We will be observing our right and protecting our sanctuary city status. And so that is something that we will maintain, and that in the instances where it is appropriate and where we can, like I said, that we're providing immigration safe plea offers. In drug dealing cases, we are still offering 32 PC felonies. No, we are not offering misdemeanors because we don't think that that's appropriate when somebody is selling something as lethal as fentanyl. But we're making sure that we're still making offers that we believe are appropriate when we need to and where we need to. But also understanding that in certain cases, rape cases, domestic violence, that we have to move forward with the charges that reflect the conduct in those serious cases. But knowing that on the back end, we will not be cooperating with any deportation proceedings. We will not be cooperating with ICE or any other federal agency that is seeking to deport someone.
Thank you, Ms. Jenkins. A 1-minute follow-up. How do you distinguish between the cases that you will look for immigration consequences versus the cases that you will not? You raised several crimes just now in your response. Is that list written out somewhere? Is it shared publicly so that the public can understand how you are both honoring the sanctuary city policy as well as trying to balance the other priorities of your administration?
No, there's no list written out. There are certain cases, obviously, or situations like in drug dealing where you have those options, and where people have different avenues of accountability, right? Some will go into a vocational program, some may go into drug treatment, some may go into, may have to go to the jail, some may do different things. But in situations of, our most heinous crimes like rape and murder, you are making a strictly a public safety consideration that leaves you very few options in that regard. And so that is really the difference. I don't believe in blanket policies. I want to always retain our discretion to make sure that we are making an individualized decision in each case as to what's appropriate. And so for that reason, there's no set, rule in our office as to any specific case.
Thank you. Mr. Veronese.
I'm pretty sure what we just heard is that Interim DA Jenkins is going to decide when and where she will apply immigration and deportation as a remedy. Let me make it very clear. In my administration, immigration law is not the duty of the district attorney. It is not something that I will partake in. And that is a blanket policy. It's absolutely unnecessary for the district attorney to participate in immigration law. It's a federal law, and if the feds want to enforce it, they can enforce it. It's interesting that we're talking about sanctuary city laws. The sanctuary city law that we're talking about right now was drafted by my mother, Angela Alioto, years ago in San Francisco. This is an issue that is very near and dear to my heart. It came about because my father himself was an immigrant here in San Francisco. I'm a first-generation San Franciscan. And so I know the history of it. I know why it was passed, and I know why it should be enforced. And it absolutely should be. We need to be protecting our immigrants in San Francisco. There are tools of oppression that have been built into the criminal justice policy, and deportation is one of them. I see it in my civil cases where I have non-immigrants or immigrants that where the plaintiffs, these large billion-dollar corporations, use deportation as a threat. It's absolutely appalling when I see it, and the idea that we are going to use that, and we will continue to use that in this criminal justice system, in this DA's office, is appalling, and it absolutely should be abolished. We should not be enforcing immigration law. It's not our job, frankly.
Thank you. The next question will be answered first by Ms. Jenkins, then Mr. Veronese, then Mr. Hamasaki. Many communities of color, including the AAPI community, have concerns about state surveillance, including the recent Board of Supervisors vote to allow SFPD access to non-city cameras for live surveillance. How will you approach the use of surveillance technology in a way that protects privacy and prevents racial profiling?
Yes, and I did support that legislation because at this point in our society, juries, quite frankly, demand video evidence. They expect it. They're accustomed to seeing on the news and on their phones video evidence. But I also do absolutely believe that we should uphold people's privacy rights. The police need to be able to articulate a reason and a foundation for having access to those cameras and to that footage. And I will tell you that what I have found in this work is not only does it allow us to ensure that we are prosecuting the right person who committed the crime, right? It can oftentimes help with establishing ID in a way that is much more reliable than, say, some eyewitnesses' perception, and relying on that eyewitness perception who is seeing something under the stress of a situation, which oftentimes we know is less reliable. But it also allows us to exonerate the innocent. And I will tell you that recently I was evaluating what to do in a murder case. And it was only because of having video footage that I was able to see that the person who had been arrested was acting in self-defense. There were no witnesses who were willing to speak. And unfortunately, without that video evidence, it's very likely that he may have ended up charged with a crime and with that murder. And so for as many times as we're able to ensure that we're prosecuting the right person, we're able to also ensure that we're not prosecuting the wrong person. And so that is why it is so valuable to me and to this system, and why I was a proponent of giving access. But at the same time, I believe we have to make sure that there are safeguards in place, that there's an articulable reason for the access, and that we're very transparent about the way that it can be used and by whom.
Thank you. Mr. Veronese?
So, the issue of privacy is written into our Constitution. It's written into our California Constitution. It's been legislated over the life history of our country. And there's a ton of case law around this. The bottom line is, when it's used in criminal cases, right, there's a difference between information that has been gathered in a public forum, in other words, people walking down the street, and then information that has been gathered in violation of somebody's privacy rights. And so I am not for the use of information that has been gathered in violation of somebody's privacy rights. In the same way, the rape kits were used to charge an individual. We absolutely have to uphold. It's our job. We swear to it when we're sworn in as district attorney, to uphold the United States Constitution and to make sure that people's privacy rights are being upheld. And the problem with this office and the history that this particular interim DA has shown is that she has no problem violating those rights as long as she can get a conviction. Now, a conviction at all costs is illegal in many cases. Judges have in some cases reprimanded her for actually doing that. And so what you're going to get with my office is you're going to get an ethical district attorney's office that follows the law. And so when it comes to privacy rights, yes, information that is gathered publicly, that is out there in the public forum, fine, we could and we absolutely should use that. But information that would otherwise require a warrant for you to get, absolutely not. If there's no warrant there, a lot of that stuff isn't even admissible. And so you can't even use that, or even pretend to use that information, or even use the threat of using that information against somebody. And that's the ethics that's the criminal justice system that the people of San Francisco demand. And it's why Chesa Boudin was elected into office, because they saw, you can have bad cops in San Francisco, but you can also have bad prosecutors. And if you want to get rid of bad cops, you got to get rid of bad prosecutors as well. And I intend on doing that when I become DA.
Mr. Hamasaki?
Thank you. So I actually worked on the original surveillance law in San Francisco with SFPD. when I was a police commissioner. And the problem that we had with the original law was that, as district attorney says, you could apply, the police could apply to conduct surveillance under for serious cases. And it wasn't a blanket open policy like the new one that the district attorney supports. But the problem we had was that the police continually violated the law in its previous incarnation. They were sued by, I believe, the Electronic Freedom Foundation and the ACLU for surveilling political protesters. Now, as we're seeing this, Stop AAPI hate movement, we have to understand that under the new threshold that the district attorney supported, the police can surveil peaceful protesters speaking out about AAPI violence. What it did was, instead of just being available for serious crimes, it made it available for basically everyday use. And so now, with the district attorney's support, the current district attorney's support, the police can surveil us on the street anytime through cameras. The argument that the police somehow need this video to convict people, the video still exists. The police can always get a subpoena or a warrant or just cooperation from an individual or business to get the video evidence as it exists now, even without either of those laws. That's never been a problem. But this allows them to monitor us going about our everyday lives in a way that has been used by repressive governments that some of our AAPI residents come from. So I have opposed this law, and I continue to oppose the new law.
Thank you. This next question will be answered first by Mr. Veronese, then Mr. Hamasaki, then Ms. Jenkins. There are many city agencies involved in the criminal legal system. What kinds of working relationships should exist among the DA's office, SFPD, and sheriff?
So you're right, there absolutely are. And in fact, while there should be a working relationship, there also should be a level of independence between those offices. And by way of example, between the mayor's office and the DA's office, we don't see that today. There's a dozen examples there, but getting to the relationship between police, fire, probation, parole, all of these different agencies, even the courts for that matter, are part of this criminal justice system. CDCR is a part of this system. The sheriffs are obviously a part of this system. What's really important is that the chief law enforcement officer stick up for the rights of the people of San Francisco. That's the number one job of the chief law enforcement officer, to keep people safe in San Francisco. And so in doing that, you need to make sure that all of these relationships work together. And one of the very first things I will do as district attorney is to go to the board of supervisors. I've already been talking to a bunch of them about this, and making sure that the mayor's office does not have the appointment authority of the chief of police. The mayor plays politics with this chief of police. She has these press conferences, looks tough, and frankly, it demoralizes the police department, because ultimately she doesn't have that criminal justice authority. That authority lies within the district attorney's office. I would like to see the police department, the chief of police, either be under the sheriff's officers, the sheriff's department, who is an elected officer of the city, under the district attorney's office. Is also a viable option, although it's an out-of-the-box idea. But the only way that would really work is that if we legislated accountability through the Department of the Attorney General's office, to make sure that we can still hold police officers accountable in a way where there is no conflict of interest. Morale is a huge problem in the police department right now. I was a San Francisco police officer. I have many friends. I was president of the 185th Police Academy class. I have many friends who are in there right now. And frankly, they're not doing their job because they're not getting the support that they need from the criminal justice system, from the leadership in the criminal justice system. They take extraordinary risks on a daily basis, and they're not willing to do that because they're not supported by the system. They will get that support under me, but at the same time, we have to hold bad cops accountable. We've got to get the bad cops out of the system. I've been doing that work since 2004 as police commissioner, but also we have to get rid of the bad prosecutors. There are those as well, and I will work hard on that as well.
Mr. Hamasaki?
Thank you. So a fully functioning and well-oiled machine of criminal justice, it requires that all of the parties are working towards a common goal, and that's public safety. public safety will be my priority as district attorney. But in that context, we have to make sure all of our partners are working together. On the police commission, I oversaw discipline of police officers, everything from low-level offenses to very serious crimes. And I think I was successful in holding them accountable. Candidate Alioto Veronese, I think discussed a real problem, which is there's a cultural and morale issue within the police departments that I think Heather Knight has reported extensively on, where people simply aren't doing their jobs. That puts public safety at risk. That puts public safety at risk when the mayor's office doesn't do her job. That puts public safety at risk when the prosecutor's office doesn't do its job. And when the police aren't doing their job, that's a big danger to San Francisco, because the police are the frontline responders to crimes, to violence, and going on strike because you're unhappy with the leadership, I think is a real problem. And I think that that's something that we can all work together to hold and create accountability around. I think as a leader, you have to work together, but you also have to be independent. And I think independence is one of the things that I've worked hard on in my career, is never letting, even when I had these roles in service as president of multiple organizations and leading nonprofits, I maintain my independence regardless of whoever was working with me or around me. Thank you.
Jenkins?
Yes, I absolutely believe that the city right now needs all of the partners to work together. We have to. We have a joint mission. We can't prosecute cases unless the police make arrests and bring them to us. We have to be in constant communication with the sheriff's department about the work that they're doing, how they can support both of our agencies, as well as staffing issues within their agency. And so that is something that I have already demonstrated that I am doing, most certainly with SFPD. I've had numerous meetings with Chief Scott, because the left hand needs to know what the right hand is doing. If they change strategy and are now addressing, seeing crime trends and addressing those trends appropriately, we need to have policies in place in the DA's office to address those same crimes. And so that is what we have been doing. Of course, it doesn't absolve our responsibility to prosecute anyone who commits crime, but the mayor's office, the board of supervisors, all of our justice partners all need to be rowing in the same direction for what's best for San Francisco. And so, it's unfortunate. The DA's office has 320 employees, over 100 lawyers, almost 130 lawyers. And so there would be no possibility that the DA could also be running the police department. That's just not something that is feasible nor possible. There aren't enough hours in the day. We need to learn how to work with our partners and to make sure that we're making the decisions that are best for public safety. We also can't antagonize our partners. If we have an issue, we need to be able to discuss that privately. And I think we know that one of the candidates in this race has been expressly antagonistic of SFPD, and that is an issue. We will revert back to what we had under the previous administration, which is no working relationship, if that's the way that process is going to be conducted. And so we have to make sure that we're all doing what it takes to put public safety first, and not ourselves and not our own interests. And that's what I've been doing already for the last 8 or 9 weeks.
Thank you. The next question will be answered first by Mr. Hamasaki, followed by Ms. Jenkins, then Mr. Veronese. How do you plan to engage with community groups that are critical of you if you become DA and your policies, but are still your constituents?
I think that's very simple. Just get out into the community. When I was on the commission, I was known as the community commissioner, because I would answer every email, every phone call, and no matter if somebody was yelling at me, I would talk with them and try to work through their issues. On the commission, I would get out into the neighborhoods, into the communities, and meet with people that might have different perspectives than I do, but also understanding that we have common ground. There's ways to work together, even with people we disagree with. I think that I have a long history of working with community groups and community organizations. For a recent working group before I left the commission, I put together a working group or an organization of 60 different community groups, including some Asian American community groups, to address racial bias in traffic stops. It's when I was on the commission too, and I think interim district attorney was referring to me when she said antagonistic. I would still go down into the station houses, and sometimes people would have opinions. I would respectfully listen to them, and sometimes I'd respectfully disagree. But you just can't be rolled over by the police, the mayor's office, or anyone else. You have to be independent. You have to stand up for yourself, and you have to represent the community, not just the mayor's office. As president of the Asian American Bar Association, we worked with a number of community groups, including CAA, ALC frequently, to really hear and address the needs, the wants, the desires of the community within our organization. So I'm kind of a community guy, and one thing is that I've done all of this as public service. I got paid $100 a month for the police commission for about 60 or 70 hours. But other than that, it's all been, on my free time, because I believe in the community, and the community strengthens us all.
Ms. Jenkins?
Yes, so this is something I've already been doing as the DA, which is reaching out to both electeds that either endorse the previous DA or simply, clearly have a different, maybe ideological platform than I do, to express my desire to work with them, particularly to serve their districts, and to find what common ground that we can work on. With respect to the juvenile policy that I released, I called in members of the community, both juvenile justice partners and stakeholders, people some of whom I believed would have concerns, some of whom I knew would come into the office not wanting to ever hear that we would even consider prosecuting somebody 16 or 17 as an adult. But wanting to engage in a conversation with them about what their concerns are, what their thoughts are, share with them my perspective from a law enforcement standpoint, and as the DA, and have that dialogue, go back to the table with their concerns, adapt the policy to address some of those concerns. And so I really think that it's something that is necessary, it's something that is fruitful, and it's something that can be done in a very positive fashion. I think you can't just listen to people who agree with you, right? That does nothing for the process. You have to be willing to engage in a dialogue with people who may disagree, because there's always something that you can gain from them and that you can take away that will hopefully improve the way that you're doing the work. And so it's not just something that I'm saying, it's something that I'm demonstrating every single day as I do this work, to walk into all of those environments and into all those meetings with an open mind, trying to find common ground where we can agree to disagree, or where we can find what we can agree on and what we can move forward on, because I think it's going to be essential to unite San Francisco. No longer can we have a toxic environment where people are not solution-based or solution-oriented. We have to be willing to, take all of our shades of blue together to find what's going to work.
Mr. Veronese?
So San Francisco is a very unique city. We have got all of these different diverse constituencies that exist throughout San Francisco. Some of them are much louder in the political process than others. I've been in or around them my entire life, in my public service to the city, and my family's public service to the city. But the important thing about being in a leadership position and being an executive position such as the district attorney, the chief law enforcement officer of the city, is that you make the tough decisions, right? You are there to take all of your experience and to take all of the ideas and your relationships and all of them, meeting with the different constituencies on a regular basis and gaining the confidence in those communities right? So that when you make a very tough decision that even some of them are not going to agree with, because you're going to run across this on a regular basis, right? San Francisco is so different that it has all of these different opinions. You're not ever going to make a decision that absolutely everybody is going to agree on. So what's important is that you take leadership positions, that you're not just up there talking about policy and doing press conferences and making yourself look good, but actually going out there and sending the message to the community that there are some things that you can all agree on, and that is public safety, that is keeping people safe. Because as I've said throughout this campaign, whether or not you're on the left or you're on the right, in a lot of these cases, it's really just a matter of right versus wrong, not left versus right. Those people on the far left who've had their bicycles stolen, or their cars broken into, or their houses broken into, they're just as tired of that as the people on the moderates, the conservatives, or even Republicans in San Francisco. As the Chronicle's recent poll has shown, San Francisco is just fed up with the direction that it's currently going in, and that it's still going in today. I mean, we still see these things today in the Marina north side of the city. We saw just the other day how this couple had their house broken into 3 times in one night, and it's all videotaped, and the burglars are quite literally laughing at us. They're laughing at this district attorney. They're laughing at this criminal justice system because it's laughable. It's not protecting them. And so we need a system that protects them. And we can all agree that safety and crime should be prosecuted. And that's just not happening.
Thank you. In the interest of time, your closing statements will be 1 minute each, and Carly will use the emoji to indicate when you have 30 seconds left. We will start with Ms. Jenkins, followed by Mr. Veronese, and then Mr. Hamasaki.
Thank you. One thing that I have to point out and emphasize is that I'm the only candidate in this race who has ever worked in any DA's office, who has ever ushered a victim through the court process in a criminal courtroom, who has ever done this work. And I think that it really shows in many of the answers that we've heard today. But one thing that I am doing, and that I've been doing for the last 8 years, is making sure that I proceed in the way that we handle cases in the DA's office in a manner that is not only to promote justice for our victims, but is to make this system more equitable and fair for those who have been accused of a crime. And I think it's very telling that when I go around this city, not only do I receive a lot of support and praise from those who just want to feel more safe, but I also run into people who I've prosecuted previously and their families who have said, you know, I remember when you had my case, or when you had my relative's case, and I applaud the way that you handled it back then. And that's the type of environment that I'm trying to promote within the San Francisco DA's office and within our broader criminal justice system, a system that promotes fairness and still brings about safety.
Thank you. Mr. Veronese.
Ms. Jenkins has a real problem with the truth. I worked in the DA's office for 5 years, and you just heard her say that none of the people that are on this panel have ever worked in the DA's office. I worked in the Hallinan administration as a senior investigator for 5 years. Look, the bottom line is that criminals are laughing at us. You walk into a Walgreens and it gets ransacked. You're being victimized there as a patron of that Walgreens. You walk down the street, you're being victimized constantly. The criminals are laughing at us, and they're laughing at us because we don't have a district attorney that is worthy of being district attorney in San Francisco and really sending the message to people that the DA is going to stick up for them and deliver to them a San Francisco they deserve. San Francisco is geographically one of the most beautiful cities in the world, but we're lying below this layer of soot that is just, frankly, just a lack of leadership. And I will deliver that for San Francisco. We're going to fight for the San Francisco we all deserve when I'm district attorney. And when people come to visit San Francisco and they leave San Francisco, they're going to say, things are changing. They have a DA that's fighting for them. We're coming back to San Francisco because things are actually changing. So thank you for the opportunity today. I really appreciate everybody's time here.
Thank you. Mr. Hamasaki.
Thank you. I think this forum has made clear why I myself received all of the first place votes. Mr. Veronese was also endorsed by the Democratic Party, and the current interim DA received 0 votes in any round. We need leadership, and that's what the Democratic Party has recognized, along with a number of supporters in the community. I'm backed by the Rose Pack Democratic Club, Judge Lillian Singh, Judge Julie Tang, Norman Yee, former president of the Board of Supervisors, Sandy Fewer, The Asian American community has been my history and has been my biggest supporters. I look forward to serving the Asian American community in the way I have through my entire career, through public service. It's never been about me making money or taking Republican money for campaigning. It's about serving the people, and that's what we've got to get back to. We've got to put aside all of these politics and get back to an independent district attorney who's willing to serve the people. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for making the time to talk to Chinese for Affirmative Action and our community. We wish you the best of luck. Thank you. Bye.